Now we're in the second section. This is question 2A. It's for 1 mark. Let's just look at the question. Biotic and abiotic factors are what make up ecosystems. Biotic factors are living things in an ecosystem, whereas abiotic factors are the non-living things. Select the location for each factor in the Arctic marine ecosystem. This is another easy question as well. It goes for 1 mark. So let's just identify these factors. So first, for biotic factors are basically the living things in an ecosystem. In a nutshell, everything in an ecosystem that's living, that's a biotic factor. So over here we have water, fish, plankton, carbon dioxide and sunlight. We know fish is a living organism, so let's just write fish over here. First one is fish. The second one is plankton. These are the only living organisms, so they're the only biotic factors over here. Let's just copy, let's just paste this over here, and we have abiotic factors. For abiotic factors, we can just write everything else. Carbon dioxide is an abiotic factor because it's non-living, obviously, and sunlight, and then water. Boom. That's it for question 2A. Now we have question 2B. Let's just read it. The food web for the Arctic marine ecosystem the scientists are studying is shown below. And we have an image given down below for our reference. Let's just look at it. We see multiple organisms, so let's just move on to the question and see what they're asking. This is the diagram once again. I think we can just look at this image after the question for our reference. The question is, identify the producer in this Arctic marine ecosystem. That question, I think it goes for 1 mark. To just identify the producer over here. We know that plankton, they're basically organisms which use sunlight to perform photosynthesis, and they get their own nutrients from that. So they are the primary producers which other organisms eat. So you can just write plankton. That's it. Now we have question 2C, which asks us to identify one food chain of 4 organisms in the diagram in part B. Let's just make a food chain right over here. There are multiple combinations for this one, but let's just stick to one. You guys can attempt this question as well, and you can just build your own food chains. So let's start. First, let's just look at the diagram over here. Looking at this, let's just build our food chain. So over here we see we have plankton. The plankton are eaten by the krill. The krill is eaten by a penguin, and the penguin is eaten by a polar bear. As simple as that. Let's just write it over here for our reference. First, we know there's plankton, a simple food chain. Plankton, let's just copy this, paste it here. We have plankton, we have krill. Next, let me just do this. Oh my bad. Let me just do the same process. Then we have our penguin, and then at the end we have our polar bear, which is our apex predator. So this is our primary producer, this is our primary consumer, this is our tertiary consumer, this is our apex predator. Then that's it. Now we have question 2D. Let's just read the question. The scientists collected data on the number of organisms in the area that they were studying. The data is shown in the graph below. Let's just look at this graph. We see it just shows a simple food chain. Let's just look at the question now. Use the food web and part B. So food web. Use the food web and part B to explain the trends shown by the graph. You must use scientific terminology in your answer. Let's just, and it's a 4 marker, so we're gonna write 4 points for this one. So let's just frame our answer. Just keep the points ready. So first things first, from the graph we can observe the trends. We can see that is the number of organisms they decrease as we move up the food chain. And just write that the number of organisms decrease as we move up the food chain, so the food web. Then a second trend that we can observe is that there is inefficient transfer of energy between organisms, because if there was no energy loss, then I think we would be seeing these organisms at similar, at similar numbers. Let's just write that there is inefficient transfer of energy in the food web between the organisms. Then let's look at the third trend. We see that apex predators population is comparatively low when you compare it to the plankton. So the apex predators, which is the polar bear, population is the lowest when you compare it to the producer. The fourth point can be the producers have the highest population compared to all the other organisms in the food web. That's it. Now we have question 2E with us. Let's just read the question. To survive the extreme cold temperatures in the Arctic, scientists build snow shelters. They pack snow loosely together to form the walls and the floors of the shelter. At night, when the scientists are sleeping, the inside of the shelter is warmed by the heat from their bodies, as shown in the diagram below. Let's just read the entire thing. Using scientific terminology, describe the process by which thermal energy is transferred from the scientist's body to warm the air inside the shelter. So let's just keep a text box ready for our answer. So let's just look at the diagram. In the diagram, we see that warm air is at the top of the shelter. So this basically means that we're dealing with gases and air. So the process is called convection. A simple definition for those of you who don't know what it means. Convection is basically the process of heat transfer in gases. So let's just write that. The process is called convection. Let's just write it a simple way. And our second point can be the heat from the scientist's body warms up the surrounding air and the warm air rises to the top of the shelter. So that's what happens over here. So basically the heat from the scientist's body, it is released and it is warm. It basically warms up the surrounding air, the air that surrounds the scientist. And as we know that cold air is more denser than warm air. As warm air rises up, the cold air, it comes down. As it is more dense, the cold air, it basically sinks, and the warm air rises up. That can be our third point. The cold air is more denser than the warm air, so it moves down, whereas the warm air settles at the top of the shelter. And boom, that's our answer. Don't think we need a comma over here. That's our answer right over there. It's a really simple answer. Now we have question 2F. It says use your answer from part E to select the best location for the scientist to sleep. Let's just look at the image that is given in part E question. We can see that this is the image that is given. We have to just determine the best location for the scientist to sleep. So obviously the scientist has to be warm. So the best position for him to sleep would be point A, the location, because the Arctic is a location where there are extreme temperatures and the scientist has to keep warm or he's gonna dry. He's basically gonna die with frostbite. So point A it is. That is our answer for question 2 if it's a really simple one. It's just a matter of identifying the best location. We have question 2G over here. So let me just summarize it for you. It's basically talking about hand warmer. So you don't need to read all of this. Let's just look at this over here. This question that we need. This is the important part. This can save your time in exams as well. Just don't look at the descriptions over here because it's just a waste of your time. I just put them to waste your time. So let's just read this. The chemical reaction happening inside the hand warmer is shown here. Select the correct coefficients to balance the equation. So let's just look at this equation and let's figure out how to balance this together. So how can we solve this? Let's think. So first we can see that there are 2 ions over here and there are 3 oxygens, but when we look at these we only see there's 1 ion and 2 oxygens. So how can we balance this? Because for the equation to be balanced we need to have the same amount of atoms here and here. What if we had 4 ions and what if we had 3 oxygens? Because if we put 4 Fe and 3 O2 and if we put 2 Fe, 2 O3, we'll see that they have the same amount of atoms here and there. So if we add 2 Fe, 2 O3 over here, you can see that we'll have 4 ions and 6 oxygens. So based on this, what if we just change this? So let's put 2 over here. Let's just add 2 big box. It's overlapping. Let's just put 2 over here, 2 Fe2O3, and then if we put 2 Fe2O3 we'll have 4 ions and 6 oxygens. So in order for us to get 6 oxygens we can just put 3 over here. Just put 3 oxygens. We put 3 oxygens, it's 3 O2, so if we multiply this we'll get 6 oxygens. So 6, that's sorted. Then if we move on to the next one, we have ion over here. So let's just write 4 because there's nothing, it's just ion, it's 1 ion, so we can just write 4 Fe. So we know there are 4 Fe's over here as well, 2 into 2 which is 4. So boom, that's done, settled. It's balanced. This is same, this is same, this is same, and this is same. We have the same amount of oxygen and the same amount of ion. So our equation is balanced. And that's it for this question. Now we have question 2H. So let's just look at it. Identify the evidence that a chemical reaction is taking place when the oxygen in the air reacts with iron to form iron to oxide. Let's not get confused over here. Let's just think in consideration to the heating packs over here because they work on the same principle. So let's just think, what is the indicator, what indicates that? Now we have question 3a, which is a 1 marker.
How do we know
it's a
that
state
it's taking
question,
place?
so let's just read it.
If we think
State
from
of
the
nutrients that a
context of
fish needs to
hand warmer,
maintain
we
life.
know that
So
in
let's
the
just
hand
list
warmer
down the
temperature,
five
it warms our hands.
First we have
And how does that happen? It only
proteins,
happens when the reaction
carbohydrates.
takes place.
So this question is actually not
we
asked.
know that
and
the
minerals.
change of
Hand
temperature
any
is
two
an
from these
indicator
will go in the
that
reaction
anything in the
with
surroundings.
So
that is
so
going
let's
to be
actually- and another word for fats is lipids, so you can add that as
Let's
well.
just write that.
But anything
General
apart from
English
these,
sounds like
you
that's
write,
a point.
you can
You
add
won't
other
get
points for
marks.
this as well, such
Let's
as
just write 2.
let's just
Change
go,
in
I'm
color,
gonna go with
proteins,
any other point that you would want to write.
proteins,